I'm excited about our next guest. A couple of weeks ago, maybe about a month ago, I brought up the point that there was a connection between gardening and mental health. And so I called around, and they said, okay, the guy you got to talk to is Dr. Charles Hall. We're going to talk to him right now. Dr. Hall is the professor and Ellison Chair in the International Floriculture in the Department of Horticulture Science and College of Agriculture and Life Science. So up in the
what university is he at?
I don't know. Have you heard of this guy? Dr. Hall, how are you?
Well, the Dr. Hall I knew, I want to know if he's still alive or not. He was quite a long time ago.
I think gardening has helped him. Are you a gardener, Dr. Hall?
That's exactly right. Gardening is the key to longevity, physically
Honestly,
and mentally.
I think you're absolutely right. When Calvin will talk about these master gardeners, and he'll just bring up these ages that are, they're 80, 90, nearly 100, and still participating. Well,
exactly.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Hall.
And I think, Dr. Hall, you know Mark Peterson, too.
Yeah, I think you do.
Well, I don't know if you did a long time ago. Yeah, when I worked for the system, I worked for the Texas Forest Service. And
it's been a minute or two.
Yes, it has been a long time.
Well, so we won't keep the people that are listening waiting anymore.
Right.
How did you get involved with with mental health and gardening? The connection between the two.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm an agricultural economist, so this is not the typical thing that an economist would be looking at. But since I deal a lot with flowers, shrubs, and trees, and the growers and the landscapers and the garden centers that are, installing and maintaining those, I saw our sales of flowers, shrubs, and trees kind of flatlining. We're a maturing industry. It's not like back in the 70s and the 80s when we were growing at double digits every year as an industry. So I said to myself, you know what? We need a better value proposition. We need to not just talk about pretty or talk about nutrition, but we need to talk about some of the functional benefits that plants and greenscapes and gardens provide, and those being the economic benefits, the environmental, what we call ecosystem services benefits, and then lastly, those health and well-being benefits. And when I'm giving my presentations around the country, and I'm talking about those types of benefits, it's really the health and well-being benefits that resonate most with folks in the audience. And I think that's not by chance, because we just came out of a global pandemic, and we saw right in the midst of the pandemic, I had interviews with media all around the country, and they were saying, Charlie, what's the deal with everybody doing more gardening and landscaping? And I said, well, we're staying at home, and we're looking outside, and we're saying, man, I got to do something to improve the aesthetics of my yard. I need to do something with the kids. And so we saw a lot of interest and a lot of folks participating that had not participated before. About 18 to 20 million new gardeners around the country than what we had prior to the pandemic. And what they found was that there were a tremendous number of both physiological benefits and psychological benefits that they experienced while they were gardening.
Yeah, it really is fascinating. You have in this article that you sent me, there is a list of benefits, and some are quite surprising and encouraging, hopeful even, because gardening's wonderful, and if it would have this kind of impact, it's like, wow, okay, that's all I got to do. Actually, that's not fair, but gardening could help me with this.
There's a correlation between the effects that it has in our bodies and the effect it has on our mind and our emotions. For example, cortisol, that's the stress hormone. Well, when we're gardening, when we're outside and we have our hands in the dirt, cortisol levels go dramatically down. So that means that stress levels go dramatically down. So that right away, the gardening is one of the best stress busters that you could engage in, in order to be have a better mood, brighter outlook for the day. Gardening is where it's at.
Yeah, Calvin, I think had a quick question.
Oh no, I was just wondering how the thing that Mark and I were involved in some of the research a decade ago or so, but one of the things that was amazing to us is how the kids did better at school, and then when we followed through on it, it seemed to be because the parents became more involved with school, and I was trying to figure out how that fit into the issues you found.
Yeah, in your article, and you can tell me whether I read this right, Dr. Hall. In the article, I was telling Calvin a minute ago, that's just a small portion of the impact that gardening can have on kids. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's true because, first of all, let's just take scholastic performance.
Okay.
The kids that are fortunate enough to have school gardens at their school, the overall level of their performance on standardized tests and their overall grade point average is improved by having school gardens. There are fewer instances of bullying, believe it or not, in those schools that have school gardens. Because, when kids are out there and they got their hands in the dirt, they're less concerned about the clothes that somebody's wearing, what tennis shoes, color of skin. So it's a great social equalizer, and so not only does the incidence of bullying, but particularly in high schools, there's less graffiti, there's fewer anger outbursts, there's fewer visits to the principal's office, and then you tack on the fact that the nutritional profiles, the nutrition of the kids obviously goes up. If they have a hand in growing it, they're going to want to eat it, and then they go home and they influence their parents. And, kids can be persuasive and said, look, this is awesome at school, and we grew these. Can we grow some tomato plants? Can we grow some peppers? And that's in fact, the Junior Master Gardening Program, that was one of the outcomes of their Learn, Eat, Grow, and Go program, was that the nutritional profile of the entire family goes up, not just the kids. Yeah.
Well, and the gardening was the vehicle that brought the parents of this diverse family, the diverse economy, economical situation, cultural situation. But gardening was a kind of we're all together on that. We all value it, and we can all communicate. We'll figure out a way to communicate
and
it.
I think the research touched on that, of bringing the community together where there are community gardens. Well, that's another aspect.
Yeah, and
absolutely.
Bringing the whole community, whole neighborhood, not in different levels of socioeconomic.
Yeah. Dr. Hall, talk about the social impact of a community garden and on the people that participate, or just maybe being a master gardener or things like that.
Well, it's actually, you've got all types of gardeners. You got your master gardeners, and you got the younger, less experienced gardeners that are all coming together. And so there's more intergenerational communication and exchanges going on. The old folks teaching the young folks on what they used to do in terms of their gardens, and it's more eyes on the street. And so when we have studied those cities around the country that have really bought in on community gardens, then crime rates go down. And if you take some of these cities have had to actually hire fewer policemen. They've hired fewer police cars and infrastructure because, again, it's more eyes on the street. There's intergenerational relationships that are forged, and you don't see a lot of crime in the midst of community gardens. You have in certain circumstances, some food disappears, but that's all part of it. Is that those who are in need feel free to come to the community garden and partake, and so there's very little abuse of that goes on around the country. It's been mostly positive in terms of all the outcomes I just talked about.
How does it translate to success in learning science and like environmental issues too? Is it
like STEM?
Oh, yeah.
The increase in STEM aspects in the elementary school. Okay.
It's a huge component of the STEM education, and you mentioned the environmental consciousness. Studies show that kids, when they are exposed to gardening, and they whether it be or landscaping or urban forestry or being out in nature, being outside, the more there's a correlation between them being outside and participating in those activities and their environmental consciousness their entire lives. In other words, those that participate as a kid, they're going to be adults that have a higher level of environmental consciousness than those who don't have the opportunity to do those things.
We're talking to Dr. Charles Hall. He's professor and Ellison chair in the International Floriculture International Floriculture in the Department of Horticulture Science and the College of Agriculture and Life Science at Bryan College Station.
Yeah,
Calvin wanted to know which...
He has to read that, by the way.
Yes, I do have to read that. I wasn't sure we were going to have to, just to kind of poke you a little bit. I said, I'm not sure how much time we'll have for the interview after I read his title. Hey,
well, I want to warn you that Milton is a graduate of the University of Texas in Austin.
I have a feeling he's okay with that.
Well, we all have our crosses to bear.
There you go. Nice job, Dr. Hall. Okay, so I have a question for you. Tell me whether this sounds correct, that I am guessing that intuitively, because of your involvement in the economics of agriculture and gardening and things like that, that you weren't surprised by the results, but maybe surprised by the extent of how deep it goes and how, like you were talking about, less police and more community involvement and things like that. Is that fair or no?
No, that's a fair statement. In fact, it's we intuitively we know that this is good for us.
Yeah.
But we didn't know the extent to which it affects us physiologically within our bodies and how much better our moods and our emotional well-being is impacted. So yeah, that's a fair statement. And one of the things that I'll emphasize right now is that we owe a lot of gratitude to the medical profession and the psychological profession, because they are the ones that sponsored a lot of this research.
Oh, is that
it
right?
didn't necessarily come from USDA or from the traditional agricultural or horticultural grant funders. This was the medical field that was investigating this, or the psychological field. So when you publish in those types of outlets, I mean, you have to know exactly what the impact is and be able to quantify it. Otherwise, you don't get published. So that's one thing that I have a great deal of confidence in the data that we're talking about, is because it's gone through a fairly rigorous peer review process.
Yeah, it sounds like it. We'll do a lightning round here. I'm going to bring up an issue, and you tell me the impact that gardening had on it. So like anxiety and stress.
Yeah, that goes down. Cortisol levels in the body go way down. Yep.
Attention deficit.
Yeah, in fact, the attention deficit theory is that when we're outside gardening, our attention spans, having used that up, once we engage in gardening, that attention span is restored much more quickly.
Okay. How about depression?
Yep. Instances of depression go way down when you got your hands in the dirt.
Yep. Now, actually, what I've seen, and this is on the internet, so I don't know how true it is. Supposedly, I've seen this twice now. In soil, there is a bacteria that when you breathe it in because you're working in it, actually increases serotonin, but I don't know whether that's right or not. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah, it does, and I guess I shouldn't keep saying dirt. I should say soil.
Soil, yeah.
But there's the mycorrhizae, and the whole soil microbiome is beneficial to us, to our bodies in terms of increasing and boosting our immunity functions. But just being outside doing that boosts levels of serotonin in the body. So it's a peaceful feeling that we feel as part of that.
I suppose that means then that I should probably quit my detailed research about comparing the effect of gardening and positive effect of gardening versus the positive effect of drinking Irish whiskey.
I think gardening's probably overall better for you.
Is that true, Dr. Hall? Are you comfortable with that?
At the same time.
You could. See, he has got solutions.
He
Calvin.
must know my wife.
Instead of a double blind, it's just
it's a double shot.
Yeah.
How about PTSD, Dr. Hall?
Yeah, communities that have gone through either the effects of hurricanes or tornadoes or some other acts of God, they recover much more quickly when they have community green spaces that they can go and they can participate in community gardens or parks, or just being outside with each other is very recuperative.
Does that go for military service as well?
Yeah.
Yes. In fact, there's an outstanding clinic there in San Antonio.
That's what I was just going to mention.
Wounded Warriors, and it's kind of a showcase for those types of sites around the country. And those soldiers that have come back from war with PTSD effects, those programs or the facilities that have programs in gardening and healing gardens, those soldiers recover much more quickly than those that don't have access to those spaces.
That's so cool. And the one that surprised me when I was reading this, it's like, oh my gosh, that's wonderful, is the impact on dementia.
Yeah. So I lost my own father to dementia. I grew up in the nursery business, and when we could get Dad outside, just potting up a houseplant or something. He was like the old dad again, joking around and one-liners. But then as soon as he got inside and not outside anymore, without his hands being in the soil, it was hardly the semblance of the man that I grew up with. So I've experienced that one firsthand.
Wow. And
the research backs it up, that dementia patients, they remember their memories enhanced by as much as 25%. They remember people's names better. They are less prone to anger outbursts and so forth. And get this, those Alzheimer's and dementia clinics that have healing gardens, the turnover of staff and doctors is also dramatically reduced because they have access to those spaces as well.
Very interesting.
Well, that's consistent with the long-term relationships we have with the teachers and that have been involved in the Master Gardeners and in the Monarch Butterfly program, and it just seems like the same. They're interested in those topics and stay with them and just continue to contribute to the community and to the horticulture.
I experienced that same thing with my father.
Okay,
when he was in
that's
dementia.
Fascinating.
Yes.
It really is. Do they have a theory as to why it seems to help?
Well, it's the physiological, the chemical reactions within our body which affect our brain, and it's just a positive influence, both physically and mentally and emotionally and cognitively.
This is so interesting. I'm sure glad we had you on. Any guys, do you have any other questions?
Well, I hear the siren in the background.
Yeah, they're coming for Calvin.
Yeah, we need more community gardens, right? So we have fewer sirens.
Ooh, I like that. And I am curious too. This is my last question, and then I'm going to ask you to kind of promote yourself a bit. Does it seem to matter whether you're doing decorative floral gardening or if you're growing vegetables and fruits and vegetables? Does it seem to be one has a greater impact than the other?
No, they both have similar impacts on the body and the mind. Yeah, so either case, depending on age and demographics, there could be some differences in which one they typically prefer. But regardless of whether it's edible or ornamental, it's effective.
Well, this has been absolutely great. If our listeners want more information on you and your research, or just on the topic in general, where do you suggest they find it?
Yeah, I've got a great website that talks about the benefits of plants and gardening and green spaces. And if they just Google Charlie Hall, Texas A&M, it's the first thing that pops up. It's search engine optimization, right?
Yeah, your SEO.
It's not hard to find. And I've got a button on my website. They just click on that button, the benefits of plants and green spaces, and it takes them to all this and more. I mean, I teach an entire semester of all this stuff.
Oh, cool.
So we've just scratched the surface of all the benefits that gardening and green spaces provide. So I encourage folks, just Google Dr. Charlie Hall, Texas A&M, and it'll be the first website that pops up. Click on that, and then there's a special button on there that talks about those benefits.
Okay, is that the I'm trying to find it here. So, yeah. I see your bio page.
Website. Yeah.
Okay. Is that the A&M website, the Horticulture Science or Horta Science at tamu.edu?
Correct.
Oh, I see it. Okay. Yeah, the Ellison chair. Okay. Well, I'll find it, and if not, we'll maybe we can share the link. But this has been great. Yeah. Thank you so much. This is so fast.
I always talk about the link, ellisonchair.tamu.edu.
Oh, is that it?
Super simple. Just Google Charlie Hall, Texas A&M.
Okay, well, I did go to UT, so I may make things more complicated.
Count me out. Milton can't do anything simple.
Dr. Hall, thank you so much. This has been absolutely great.
Well, it's been good to hear from you again.
Yeah.
Thank you again.
Yep. Good to talk to you guys. Thanks for the invite.
Thank you for coming on.